Welcome to Tales from the Dark Realm. I'm your host, horror author Michael J. Elliott, and welcome to the Creepypasta channel dedicated to providing you with 100% original creepypasta stories and poetry. Let the terror commence. Lorna Braddock glanced in the rear-view mirror. Her daughter Audra was sitting quietly in her booster seat. She was holding on to Pookie, her panda. Audra seemed interested in watching the flow of traffic going in the other direction. "Are you okay, sweetie?" Audra continued to stare out of the window. "Yep." Lorna chewed her bottom lip nervously. Audra had always been a quiet child, but now she wondered if recent events had made her even more so. Audra's father, Reese, had been killed in a construction site accident 6 months ago. Family, friends, and Reese's work colleagues rallied around Lorna. How do you explain death to a 3.5-year-old? Lorna went to the library and collected books about angels and how to explain the concept of heaven to children. She told Audra that her daddy now lived in heaven with the angels. She tried to explain that even though they couldn't see Daddy anymore, he could still see them, and he still loved them both and would watch over them always. There were the inevitable questions, small ones because of her age. Lorna did her best to answer them. With the innocence of childhood, Audra seemed to accept them. Today, they were going to visit Lorna's grandparents. They had been unable to attend Reese's funeral due to their advanced age and their distance from Lorna and the rest of the family. They had sent her flowers and telephoned their condolences. Grandmother invited them for lunch when she was feeling better. Audra had never met her great-grandparents. Lorna had to explain that they were Nana's mummy and daddy. It was doubtful whether Audra could really comprehend the family connection. Audra became excited when Lorna went on to explain that Grandma and Grandpa lived on a farmlet. They had a pond with ducks, chickens, and a cow, and other animals. Audra had only seen these animals in picture books and on television. When her mother told her she would probably be able to pat or even feed some of the animals, she became even more happier. Lorna flicked on the indicators and eased onto the freeway turn-off. Grandma and Grandpa lived on the outskirts of a small country town. After a quick drive through the quaint town, Lorna turned up into the long driveway of her grandparents' property. Once out of the car, Audra looked around in awe at the large weeping willows and the fenced-off fields. A few moments later, the front door opened, and out from the creaky wooden fly-screen door emerged a small, thin woman. Her arms were outstretched, and there was a wide smile on her face. She carefully stepped down the few steps leading down to the ground. The old lady practically ran towards the mother and child. "Lorna!" The old woman gave her granddaughter a tight hug. "Gran, lovely to see you again." Audra clung tightly to her mother and equally tightly to Pooksy. Grandmother bent down and smiled at Audra. "You must be Audra. I'm Granny Parsons." "Oh, gee, you're such a pretty little thing." Audra giggled. "Do you like cakes, Audra?" The little girl nodded. "Oh, that's good. I've baked lots of cupcakes and treats." "Now, Gran, you shouldn't have gone to all that trouble." Grandmother stood up and waved away Lorna's protests. Rubbish. I love doing it, and I'll give you some to take home for Audra. Oh, Gran, that's lovely of you. Grandmother smiled. She looked down at Audra. Would you like to feed the ducks after lunch, Audra? Oh, sweetie, you'll love that. I used to feed them when I was a little girl. They come right up to you to take the bread. Audra's eyes widened in astonishment. Without any prompting, she gave her great-grandmother a hug. Grandmother gave Audra a kiss on the top of the head. Well, let's get inside where it's warm. You can say hello to your grandfather. As they walked towards the house, Grandmother put a hand on Lorna's arm. Lorna, your grandfather, well, he's aged a lot since you last saw him. Oh, he's not sick, is he, Gran? Well, I'm not sure. The doctors have given him all sorts of tests. I was terrified it may be cancer, but thankfully it wasn't. Then what is it? Her grandmother sniffed, but held back her tears. They don't know. They're still doing tests. He just gets thinner. Is he still eating? Yes, he still eats like a horse. He just doesn't seem to keep any weight on. Lorna picked up her daughter and carried her up the stairs. As they entered the house, Lorna felt a blast of warm air. It was a warm spring day, so the warmth from the house was a little oppressive. Her grandmother seemed to sense her discomfort. I'm sorry about the heat. It's your grandfather. He insists on having the heater on day and night. He says he can't get the chill out of his blood. Lorna put her daughter back down. I understand, Gran. He probably feels the cold a lot more, especially if he's lost all that weight. She took her daughter's hand. She seemed to have been mesmerised by the aromas of cinnamon and fruit, which had been wafting in from the direction of the kitchen. We're going to say hello to Grandpa now, Audra. He's your great-grandfather. Audra looked up at her great-grandmother, not quite understanding, but instinctively trusting the old woman. The entrance hall branched off to different rooms. The lounge room was on the right. The heat from the gas heater hit Lorna like a slap in the face. Despite the heat, Lorna felt a very real chill run through her entire body. The sight of her grandfather shocked her beyond belief. Her grandfather was painfully thin, almost to the point of emaciation. His arms and legs were like small branches. His clothes seemed to be just hanging on him. Grandpa's once thick, iron grey hair was now thin and limp. His face was gaunt and hollow. His cheekbones were prominent, and Grandpa's once bright blue eyes were rheumy and sunken. In short, he looked like a living skeleton. He gave Lorna a broad smile. It was meant to be warm and welcoming. Instead, it looked like a grinning skull. He held his arms out for her. Lorna, my little pumpkin! Lorna took an imaginary breath. She hid her revulsion and hugged her grandfather. He hugged her with a strength that surprised her. I haven't been called that in such a long time, Pop. He laughed heartily. She was expecting her grandfather's voice to be thin and reedy. Instead, it was strong and powerful, just as she'd always remembered it. Lorna knew better than to comment on her grandfather's appearance. Now, Pop, why are you sitting in here when there's so much around the place that needs doing? He laughed. Too cold for me out there, and can't find anything to warm me up. There was an uncomfortable pause. And who's this pretty little thing? Audra was clinging to her mother's leg, staring at the carpet. Lorna gently manoeuvred her daughter into the front. Audra still looked down at the carpet. This is Audra, your great-granddaughter. Grandfather smiled widely. It made Lorna shiver. Once again he held his arms out. Come over here and give your great-granddaddy a kiss, Audra. Audra spun around and buried her face in her mother's legs. No, Lorna was embarrassed, but she tried to shrug it off. Oh, she's just shy around strangers, Pop. She'll start talking your ear off in a while. Grandpa dropped his arms. His smile evaporated. He may not be in top physical shape, but he was still alert and intuitive. He knew Audra was afraid of him. Grandmother clapped her hands, breaking the tension. Well, come on, you two, into the kitchen with you both. I'm just about to serve up lunch. Grandpa, do you want me to help you into the kitchen? I can manage, thanks. Anyway, I don't eat in the kitchen. There was no disguising the bitterness in his voice. Grandma tried to make light of the situation. That's right, Lorna. Since your grandfather can't take the heater into the kitchen, I bring his meals in here. We can sit in here if you like, Pop. Audra squeezed her mother tightly. Her grandfather smiled weakly. No, it's all right, Pumpkin. You have a nice long natter with your grandma, and you and Audra can come and have a cup of tea with me after. I've got a present for Audra. Grandfather reached down beside his chair and took hold of a box wrapped in glittering golden paper. Lorna gently swung Audra round to face Grandfather and the mysterious gift. Look, sweetheart, Grandpa's got something for you. Audra was wary, but definitely interested. She smiled tentatively at her grandfather. All right, Albert, I'll bring your lunch in a few minutes. With that, the three ladies left the lounge room and headed into the kitchen. Lorna was delighted to see the child's table and chairs that Pop had made her all those years ago. Nana, I can't believe you still have my table and chairs. I wouldn't part for them for all the tea in China, and I thought it would be perfect for Audra to have her lunch on. Grandfather had made those many years ago, and it still brought a smile to Lorna's face. Grandmother had made a delicious brown Windsor soup, which Audra really didn't care for. While Grandma and Lorna lunched on marinated lamb shanks with roasted potatoes and veggies, Audra lunched on homemade macaroni and cheese, which Grandmother had thoughtfully prepared. Lorna enjoyed a cup of tea, and Audra had a strawberry milk. They were both sipping quietly while Nana collected Pop's empty plate. Lorna's eyes widened. Apart from the lamb bones, Pop's plate was spotlessly clean. You were right, Nana. Pop certainly hasn't lost his appetite. Grandmother sighed as she stacked the plates into the sink. Oh, I'm just grateful that his weight is sustained. If only he'd start putting it back again. Lorna avoided entering the conversation. Let me do the dishes, Nan. No, darling, we still have to make room for dessert first. We've got cake. Audra clapped her hands excitedly. Cake! Cake! Grandmother knelt down in front of Audra. Audra, Grandma is very, very busy. Could you do Grandma a very big favour? Audra nodded. Would you take Grandpa's cake into him? Audra chewed her lip undecided. If you can do this special favour for Grandma, you can even have ice cream with your cake. And don't forget Grandpa wants to give you your present too, added Lorna, upping the stakes. Cake, ice cream and a present. It was too tempting for a little girl to refuse. Okay, she beamed. Oh, you're such a big help to your old grandma. A few minutes later, Audra was bearing a bowl with a huge slab of chocolate cake with frosting nestled in between 2 scoops of vanilla ice cream. Audra had never seen so much cake and ice cream. Even by grown-up standards, it was huge. She hoped it wouldn't be too heavy for her. As though she was carrying the crown jewels themselves, Audra began to slowly walk out of the kitchen and towards the lounge room. When Audra was out of earshot, Lorna spoke to her grandmother. "That was clever of you, Nana." Her grandmother laughed. "I've learnt a few things about kids over the years, Lorna." I'm sorry about Lorna's reaction to Grandpa, Nana. I wouldn't want to hurt him for the world." Her grandmother patted her hand reassuringly. "I know, darling. I should have warned you on the phone, but I've lived with Albert's condition so long I just simply forgot." Lorna squeezed her grandmother's hand. "Oh, I hope they find out what's wrong soon, Grandma." Her grandmother put on a brave face. "I'm sure they will, Lorna. Now, about that cake." Suddenly, from the direction of the lounge room, came the sound of something shattering. It was followed by a high-pitched scream and then silence. Lorna's motherly concern kicked in. She leapt up from the kitchen table and ran to the lounge room. Grandmother rose from the table, a look of bewilderment on her face. At the lounge room door, Lorna froze. Her eyes widened in terror. The bowl lay broken on the hard wooden floor. Puddles of melting ice cream had begun trickling along the floor like a sweet river of stickiness. The gold wrapping paper and open box lay nearby. Lorna's eyes moved up from the floor. Then she looked at her grandfather. He had Audra cradled in his arms. Her head was resting on Grandpa's arm. Audra wasn't moving. Then Lorna noticed the vivid red stain on Audra's dress. Grandmother appeared and stood beside Lorna. She quickly took in the scene, then let out an ear-piercing scream. Grandfather's eyes darted between Lorna and his wife, then back again. He looked at them imploringly. His lips were a vivid crimson, as though they had been rendered, then smeared like lipstick. As he began speaking, Lorna saw the reddish-stained teeth. Grandfather's chin and throat glistened with blood. "She's so sweet, so lovely and warm. I just wanted to get some of that lovely warmth." His eyes pleaded for understanding. "I just wanted a kiss. Just a kiss for Grandpa."